They put enormous pressure. They showed they were capable of mobilization. And finally Gandhi came with them. And in 1930, for the first time, we demanded Sampurna Swaraj. And that's how the freedom movement really started. Subhash Bose then became active. He toured all the country over, addressing young people, particularly mobilizing them. And in 1938, the question of the president of Congress Party came up, and he wanted that he should also, because everybody else in that rank he was in had already become president, so he decided that he would stand for elections for the Congress Party president. Those days, Congress Party used to have a regular internal elections. Today, of course, there's no question of election because one family will rule, and that is a settled question. But a lot of people became apprehensive, jealous that this dynamic man would completely take over the party and leave them no place. This is an Indian weakness we have. We get easily jealous. Even if we are not equal in capability to the other person, we feel that the best thing to do is pull the person down rather than try and overtake him. And so they all went to Gandhi and said the whole character of Congress Party would change. And therefore Gandhi put up a candidate against him by the name Patabi Sitaramaiah, and declared that Sitaramaiah is my candidate, and Sitaramaiah's victory is my victory, and Sitaramaiah's defeat is my defeat. And yet when the elections came, Subhash Chandra Bose was elected, defeating even Gandhi. But the greatest of the man was, he immediately upon victory went to Gandhi and he told him that he is his leader and therefore he would go by the directions and advice of Mahatma Gandhi. But it was only a matter, the World War had started in 1939, and therefore Subhash Bose began saying, this is an opportunity for us. We should not support the British war effort. In fact, I must tell you, the history of World War II has not been correctly written, as most histories are not written. Most of the decisive battles which were won by the Allies, namely America, Britain, and countries of Europe, which although taken over by Germany, there were still those who were underground, like de Gaulle in France. They did not get the major victories. The major victories were in Africa and in Europe, were by the Indian soldiers who bravely sacrificed their lives. Many were taken prisoners by Subhash Chandra Bose, by Germany, and then Subhash Chandra Bose, because he was advocating non-cooperation with the British, he was put in jail, and then because his health was not good, he was put in his residence. And one day he slipped from there, disappeared, went to Afghanistan, and from there he went to Soviet Russia. And in Soviet Russia, unfortunately, when he landed there, he thought that Russia was against Britain, was against America, and therefore they were probably, Stalin would give support. But the day he landed, unfortunately, Stalin switched his loyalty and he changed from having an alliance with Hitler, he changed to supporting the Grand Alliance, and he became a member of that. And so Stalin told Subhash Chandra Bose that he wouldn't be able to help him. and arranged for him to go to Germany. And he went to Germany, and there all the Indians who had been taken prisoner by Germany were provided to him, and he created an Indian National Army unit there. And then he found the behavior and attitude of Hitler not conducive for an Indian, and being a man of great self-respect, he then urged the Germans to let him go to the east. The only way he could go was by submarine, and the submarine had to travel from the northern part of the northern ports of Germany, go all the way below the African continent and around the Cape of Good Hope, and then reach through the Indian Ocean, Singapore. The journey took almost 6 months, but Subhash Chandra Bose was underwater in a submarine, but because he had learned from the Ramakrishna Mission meditation and prayers, he was perfectly safe, and when he reached Singapore, he was in a very fighting fit spirit, and there the Japanese received him, and they gave him the prisoners, and he enthused them and created the army. The Indian National Army really was in the eastern coast. And slowly, wherever the Japanese went, he also led the army with them, and he was able to capture Andaman Island, and he was able to establish a base in Rangoon, and the Indian tricolor was first time hoisted on 21st October 1943, and he was elected by all his people as the Prime Minister. So strictly speaking, the first Prime Minister is not Jawaharlal Nehru, but Subhash Chandra Bose. Around this time in 1942, Mahatma Gandhi had declared Quit India movement because he felt cooperation with the British was impossible, and the line provided by Jawaharlal Nehru was not acceptable to the people, so he declared a Quit India movement, and therefore the whole British establishment came cracking down on the Congress party and made them, put them arrested, some of them tortured, some of them assaulted. And by 1943 and early 44, the Quit India movement had physically failed, although it had created a new mindset in the Indian people. Yes, we can fight. Yes, we can be independent. But in terms of struggling and fighting, it had collapsed. And it is this time that Subhash Bose's activities of leading the army into Indian territory, into Nagaland, into Imphal, and hoisting the flag, and creating a feeling that yes, maybe Subhash Bose will be able to liberate us if our peaceful method has not worked. But then the mistakes of Hitler of going to Soviet Union at the same time as fighting the European powers defeated him. I'm glad that Hitler was defeated. He was an evil man, and therefore just because he was against the British was not sufficient. But nevertheless, the Axis powers, it was called Japan, Italy, and Germany, that began to fail. And therefore, for Subhash Bose also, it meant defeat. And by 1945, Germany had collapsed. Italy was taken over by the Americans. And then Japan also, after the dropping of the atom bomb on the 8th or 9th of August 1945, Japan was almost finished. And it is at this time Subhash Bose had a problem. Who is going to give him a support? He could not come to India because the British were still ruling, and he had been declared a war criminal by the British. So there was no way he could come because the British could do anything to him. Nor he could go to Germany because Germany was finished. He could not go to Japan because Japan had been finished. So he thought of a plan, and the plan is, let me see if my old friendship with Joseph Stalin will work. And so he created this myth that he was going to fly to Japan and probably surrender, and then he staged this make-believe accident of the plane crashing in Taiwan, and the Japanese, which was just tottering at that time, their press agency put out a story on the 23rd of August 1945 that on 18th August in Taiwan, Subhash Chandra Bose died in a plane crash. And this is the theory that was circulated for years and years in our country. And what really happened has been reconstructed over the years. They have been in the files. Some of the files were destroyed by Mrs. Indira Gandhi in 1971. We don't know what was in it, but we do know which are the files that were destroyed, because the officers maintained a record of the destroyed files also. In 1991, when I was Law Minister and Commerce Minister, Mr. Chandrasekhar was Prime Minister, and he told me that the Japanese are pressing very hard to take back the ashes of Subhash Bose in Renkoji temple, and whether I could study the problem and advise so that this matter can be taken up in the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs and a decision taken. It is at that time, for the first time, I came to know of the existence of these large number of files. Earlier on, in 1977, when I was elected to Parliament, by chance I met an ICS officer called K.R. Damle, who my father-in-law was also ICS, and he was a friend of my father-in-law. So through him I met him. And he told me an interesting story. He said that when he had gone on a study leave in 1951 to United States, he got a telegram from the Prime Minister's office saying immediately proceed to Japan. So he said, I was a little unhappy, I just arrived and I was wanting to have 1 year of study leave, and suddenly I get this telegram that I should go to Japan. So I pointed this out, but the office of the Prime Minister was adamant that he must go to Japan immediately. So he, as an officer, he obeyed the orders and he went to Japan. When his plane landed in Tokyo, the ambassador of India in Japan himself came up the plane. In those days it was not like today with long aero bridges and big airports. These airports used to be small. And so he came up and told him to get down and climb up a British Airways plane, which was standing next and was going to India. So he went and sat in the plane. He found the first 2 rows of the seats had been removed. And after he sat down, the ambassador brought 2 big trunks and put it in that empty space and said, this has to be delivered to the Prime Minister of India and no one else, and gave a telex which Jawaharlal Nehru had sent to the ambassador to inform Damle. So he dutifully flew to Delhi, and when the plane landed in Delhi, the senior-most officer, called the Secretary General of External Affairs, Mr. R.K. Nehru, and a cousin of Jawaharlal Nehru. He came off the plane and said, well, let us get down the plane first. You get down. And these two trunks, I am taking custody of it. So he said, no, I will not give you custody because I have a telex from the Prime Minister's office that I should deliver it directly to him. So it was at 1 a.m. in the morning. So he said that I then was taken to the Prime Minister's house, these two trunks, and these two trunks were put before Jawaharlal Nehru, who was awake, and there were two big locks on the trunks. So Jawaharlal Nehru, he said, asked me to give the keys, and he said, no, I have not been given the keys. So he said, okay. Then Jawaharlal Nehru took a hammer and broke the lock and opened it. And there were nothing but gold, diamonds, jewelry, which the people of India, in Singapore and Malaysia and Burma and these places had given to the Indian National Army. Obviously, Subhash Bose, before making his departure from Saigon airport and claiming to go to Taiwan, he went actually in another direction, which I'll tell you about. And when he opened, he saw, he was amazed. Then he said, Jawaharlal Nehru asked me, is there anything else? He said, no. So he said, then you can go. So this is the story he told me. So then, when in 1977, I became a member of parliament from Bombay Lok Sabha. Moraji Desai and become very good friends. So one day I asked Moraji Desai that this has happened. Why don't you find out what happened to that trunk? Where did all the jewels and all go? I knew where it went, but I didn't want to say it to him. So he told me, how do you know this? So I told him that ICS officer Damle told me. So he said, you have his telephone number? I said, yes. So I gave it to him. So he immediately picked up the phone and called him and checked with him, and it turned out to be true. And thereafter, Moraji Desai went to check, called his officers, said, check this. And it turned out that the trunks were in the Prime Minister's office. It was in the Tinmurti Bhavan, where it had been delivered, where Jawaharlal Nehru was staying, for 1 year. After that, it was sent to the External Affairs Ministry for 3 years. And then it went to the archives. So Moraji went to the archives and located these two trunks. And when he opened it, he found nothing but sticks and stones and mud. All that had gone. And I used to see members of the Nehru family wearing all kinds of jewels, and I imagine they must have been from the top. I raised it in Parliament, so it's a part of the parliamentary record. And the answer of Moraji Desai is also there. It is then I began thinking that if a man can do this to Subhash Chandra Bose, and who the people of India had this faith in and gave them all their jewels and so on, then what else is true about it? And it is from that time I began taking interest to see what really happened. I found that there was a commission set up by Shahnawaz Khan. It was not a commission, it was a committee, but that did such a bad job that people were not satisfied. And so after that, after 1956, there were two more commissions. And the last commission during the Congress period, in 1970, was set up under the chairmanship of the Justice of Punjab and Haryana High Court, Justice Khosla. And in that, there was evidence, an affidavit, which Khosla never considered. He had examined that person, and that person was a person by the name as Shamlal Jain. And so I dug out the affidavit, And the affidavit he gives is the following, and then I'll connect you up with what I discovered in 1991 about the Rinpoche ashes. So that affidavit says he's called to the Khosla Commission, and because he had wanted to make an appearance, and he gave a written affidavit in which he says, in 1945, I got a call, he said around maybe 26th or 27th of December 1945, which means much after Subhash Bose's so-called plane crash, which was on 18th of August 1945. He says, I was called to by Jawaharlal Nehru. He was not Prime Minister then, but he was one of the committee members, one of the conveners of the INA trials matter. So Shri Jawaharlal Nehru told him, come immediately and come with your typewriter and bring a carbon and a couple of sheets of paper. So he said, it is 11 o'clock at night. He said, so what, even if you're in your pajamas, you come. And you come to a place called Daryaganj, in the house of somebody called Asaf Ali, who was a well-known Congress leader during the freedom struggle. And so he went running, and he describes this in the affidavit. He says that when I went there, I sat down and put the typewriter on the table. Jawaharlal Nehru said, I want you to type something, and he took out a piece of paper from the pocket, and it appeared to be, it was written in English, but he said that I remember from my memory that it appeared to be a translation, and there it was written that I have, the person who wrote it, because he says I couldn't, the signature was not legible, so I could not tell who had written it. But he said, the translation read, that I have now Subhash Chandra Bose in my custody, and I would like to know what I should do with him. He says that the original letter also, original piece which was translated from was also there, and that was in Russian. So Jawaharlal Nehru said that you type this, because it is in running hand, so I want it typed. So he typed it with a carbon, he typed it. And then he said, now I'll give you a dictation. And so Jawaharlal Nehru gave this dictation to Clement Attlee, Prime Minister of England, in which he said that I have received an intimation from a reliable source that Subhash Chandra Bose is now in Russia, and that he either used the word rascal or undependable Joseph Stalin. He has given him sanctuary, and he has sent me a note asking what needs to be done. So Jawaharlal Nehru says, but Subhash Chandra Bose is your war criminal. So you have to take, that is telling Attlee, you have to take appropriate steps. What is the appropriate test when steps for a war criminal? You shoot him at sight. That is the code in war. So this war criminal, he said, you have to take, you must interact with Soviet Union and take appropriate steps in view of the fact that Subhash Chandra Bose is a war criminal. Now this is there in the Khosla Commission appendix in the name of Shyamlal Jain. And this came with, when I was investigating whether the ashes in Zenkoji belong to Subhash Chandra Bose or not, and whether we should accept it or not. This is 1991. At that time, the papers given to me was one file which had this letter. And so I was convinced that there is a beginning now that a doubt whether Subhash Bose died. in Taiwan. And therefore I recommended to the Prime Minister, and the Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs also agreed that we should not bring back the ashes, because we don't know whose ashes they are. And there is a doubt about what happened to Subhash Bose. What this affidavit further says is that it was conveyed to him subsequently by various important people who occupied diplomatic positions, this Shamla Jain, that what really happened is in Saigon, Subhash Bose came from Burma to Singapore, and from Singapore he flew to Saigon, and from Saigon he flew to Manchuria. And to cover up that trip, he had the Japanese, the last few days of the Japanese government, issue an official press release that he had died in a plane crash. So it gives him a cover. And he went to Manchuria in a town called Dalian. It's now a very fashionable town in North China. And during World War II, Soviet Union had invaded China, and because Chiang Kai-shek, the Kuomintang party, was in power, not the Communist Party of China, and he had captured Manchuria. So when he landed in Manchuria, it was Soviet Union territory, and then the Soviet guards took him to Moscow. After that, we don't have a clear idea of what happened. But Russian diplomats who became my friends over the years in Delhi, they did indicate to me that Subhash Bose ultimately was killed in the Soviet Union. I have no way of confirming this, but Russian documents obviously will show that, and therefore Narendra Modi is doing the right thing by asking the Russians to give the papers. Now, when the right-hand man Habibur Rahman of Subhash Bose came to India in 1945 end, he met Mahatma Gandhi. And he told Mahatma Gandhi that I was in Taiwan and this happened, he burnt, all that, we did the final rites, all that. Now Mahatma Gandhi's reaction was afterwards to Sabarmati. He was in Sabarmati ashram. He told his people, don't believe what Habibur Rahman is saying, because he is only saying what his master told him to say, that is Subhash Bose himself. So he is spreading also the same thing. He died in Taiwan. He says, Mahatma Gandhi is quoted as saying, and there are plenty of news accounts of this, that I don't believe Subhash Bose died in that air crash. And he wrote a letter, which exists, to the Bose family, don't do the Shraddh ceremony because it is not certain that he is dead. So therefore, nobody believed this story. But ultimately Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated and Sardar Patel died, and so Jawaharlal Nehru became completely a law unto himself, and this myth went on. And there was no doubt that Jawaharlal Nehru never wanted the Subhash Bose to come back, because if he had come back, he would have, by popular demand, become the Prime Minister of India and not Jawaharlal Nehru. So therefore, there was this anathema. And that is why Mamata Banerjee has declassified some files that clearly show that Jawaharlal Nehru gave orders to keep tab on the family. Not only the family in Calcutta of Subhash Bose. Strictly speaking, he should have kept tabs on me too, because my uncle married a Bengali lady who was the first cousin of Subhash Chandra Bose. But they didn't know. So now the fact is that he kept, and also Subhash Chandra Bose had married a German lady and he had a daughter, and they kept tabs on her. But India sent her money on a regular basis till I think she got married in 1964 or something like that. So, therefore, Jawaharlal Nehru, it suited him for this myth to continue. Or sometimes he would have some Gumnamni Baba or somebody whom they would create. So keep the people's faith. You know, somewhere Subhash Bose will come, Subhash Bose will come, so that the questions will not be raised as to what happened to him. So, according to me, and I'm waiting for these files to confirm, this letter I'm told has come out in one of the files, this Shamlal Jain's letter. But what happened subsequently to Subhash Chandra Bose in Russia can only be clarified by the Russian government and by the British government by declassifying their documents. There are in the files many letters written by Japanese after 1945 saying that he died in Taiwan. But those, in my opinion, were forced by the British, who took control of parts of Japan, and America, of course, the conqueror of Japan, and forced them to write these things. I would not give credibility to it. But I would give credibility to the Mukherjee Commission, which was set up on a direction of the Calcutta High Court, after certain facts were brought on record and saying that the previous commissions didn't do their job. So they gave a directive, and the Vajpayee government appointed the Mukherjee Commission because the High Court had directed. Mukherjee Commission was the first commission that went to Taiwan. All the previous three inquiry bodies did not go to Taiwan, did not go and look at the place. But Mukherjee went in 2003, 2003 to Taiwan, and then he interacted with the Americans, because the Americans had captured Taiwan in 1945. So the Americans would know. So the Americans have given to this Mukherjee Commission in writing, including a communication of the CIA, that there is no record whatsoever of any plane crash between April of 1945 and December of 1945. That means it includes the period August also. There is no indication. There are no charred bodies that were admitted in the Taiwan military hospital, as claimed by Habibur Rahman and others who were his associates. So the American documentation has completely dismissed any air crash or any charred bodies in it. So that's a clear indication. So now you have a situation where these documents obviously have something. But when the Mukherjee Commission asked the Vajpayee government to give these documents, which are now in secret files, the Vajpayee government refused. And so Mukherjee went to the High Court. And the High Court then gave a direction to the government to explain why they are not giving. So the explanation was given by the Secretary to Talbire Vajpayee, Brijesh Mishra, that it will harm the relations of our country with friendly countries. Now, at that time in the war, the Soviet Union was the country. Today there is no Soviet Union. There are 16 countries: Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and so on, Ukraine, and so on. There are 16 countries, and the remaining portion is Russia. Moscow is now with a country called Russia. So there is no Soviet Union to get angry. And this happened in 1991. And second, the case of England, at that time Margaret Thatcher was in power, and she was a Conservative Party, and Attlee was the Labour Party Prime Minister. So therefore, Britain wouldn't have bothered if you release these files or not. So it was an excuse. Vajpayee was a soft variety, and Modi is a hard variety. So Modi has therefore done what Vajpayee didn't do. So there was no ill intention of Mr. Vajpayee, but it was basically he didn't like jagda. So, whereas Modi is like a tiger, he's ready to fight when necessary. So this is the thing. Now, to know the truth of how Subhash Chandra Bose died is very important. And there is, in other countries, they go on opening commissions all the time. There are many deaths in our politicians, which need to be explained, you see. And when you kind of have these reopening, then it becomes a discouragement for future to do conspiracy against other political opponents. Even today, Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, we know that Godse fired the pistol and Mahatma Gandhi fell. But what is interesting is that the first eyewitness reports of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination say 4 bullets were fired, and a picture was produced in the New York Post and Reuters agency which showed he had 4 bullets in his body. In the prosecution, the prosecutor said there were 3 bullets fired because the pistol of Godse showed 3 places empty. And Godse himself gives a statement that I only fired 2 bullets because I came with the determination I'll fire 2 bullets or no more, because any more bullets I fired I might have killed some innocent person, so I only fired 2 bullets. There is no explanation in the trial as to how you reconcile this. The only way to reconcile this is by looking at the post-mortem or the autopsy as it's called. But Gandhi, there was no post-mortem. Gandhi fell down, he did not die at that time, he was still breathing. He was taken to Birla House and kept there, and he ultimately died by bleeding. They did not take him to the hospital. Why? Nobody knows. Why there was no post-mortem? Nobody knows. So there are, these things have to be again looked at to see what is the real truth. Were there 2 bullets? Were there 3 bullets? Were there 4 bullets? It's very important, because if it is only 2 bullets, as Godse says, then somebody else from behind must have fired 2 more if there were 4 bullets. If there are 3 bullets, as the prosecution says, then 1 more bullet should have been fired. So we want to know who. So the same thing with Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, then later on with Lal Bahadur Shastri. Lal Bahadur Shastri family members told me that when his body came from Soviet Union, his body was completely blue, which means it was poisoned. And there are many other discrepancies. He also did not have post-mortem. There was no post-mortem done. Deen Dayal Upadhyay, he is supposed to have been pushed out of a train and killed by a robber. But when you see, you find that all the passengers on that first-class compartment, they had fake address. How is it possible that all the passengers in a first-class bogie have fake address? But no further investigation was ever pushed out of a train and killed by a robber. But when you see, you find that all the passengers on that first-class compartment, they had fake address. How is it possible that all the passengers in a first-class bogie have fake address? But no further investigation was ever done. So these things have to be reopened, because history must record the correct facts. In the case of Subhash Chandra Bose, we lost a dynamic leader and a man who would have given a fighting spirit to the country. And today, let me tell you, we are in a very, very dangerous situation where the Indian people will have to now steel themselves for a major fight. And that fight will be imposed on you by what is now called the ISIS. ISIS is a force which has been created because the Iraqi army was disbanded by the Americans. They were all put in jail, and the cleric of Baghdadi, as his name is called the Caliph. he was also in jail, and then when he came out, he got a ready-made army. All the Saddam Hussein army men became his IS people, all well trained, and they are a determined force. They are having an impact in our country. In Bangalore, so many people are getting arrested who belong to ISIS. And ISIS doesn't tolerate a defeat. It comes back and back again. In the case of India, ISIS and many of the militant Islamic thinkers have a grievance. And it was explained to me once by my former student at Harvard, who was from Saudi Arabia, that they had done research as to why that when Islam conquered Iran, and that time Zoroastrians were ruling Iran, within 15 years they were able to convert Iran into 100% Muslim country. Similarly, in the neighboring to Iran, there were Mesopotamia, there was Babylon, which was then merged into one country called Iraq. And in 17 years, they were able to convert that country into 100% Muslim. Same thing with Egypt. They were able to convert the whole of Egypt to Islam in just 21 years. Europe was converted to Christianity by the Christians from Palestine area, and they were able to convert Europe in 50 years. But in our country, this Saudi Arabian student said that Muslim ruled for 800 years, Christians through the British ruled for 200 years, and you're still 80% Hindu. What is the explanation? And so ISIS now says India is an incomplete chapter of Islamic history. So they want to make us all Islamic. They are very clear about it. I don't blame these Islamic militants because their mind is clear. Our problem, Hindus, is that our mind is never clear. It's like Arjuna sitting in the middle of the battle saying, why should I fight? These are my brothers. What will I get? And Krishna had to explain to him what his dharma is. So this doubt was all the time in our mind, do we do this, don't we do this, what will happen, if this will happen, that will happen. This confusion is in our mind. Today, what Subhash Chandra Bose signifies is that Virat attitude, if I am going to fight, I'll fight all the way, and he proved it in his life. We were 80% because of the fact that there was Shivaji who fought, there was Rana Pratap who lost but fought, Rani Jhansi who lost but fought, Rani Chennamma in Karnataka who lost and fought. This bravery, this Vijayanagaram Empire of Karnataka, that you see spread to more areas than the Mughal Empire and lasted longer. Akbar to Aurangzeb is only 150 years. The Vijayanagaram Empire lasted 300 years and much more territory. But you look at the history book, there's only one paragraph for Vijayanagaram Empire. That in South India there was a kingdom called Vijayanagaram Empire. But for Islam, they will have one chapter for Akbar, for Jahangir, for Shah Jahan, for Aurangzeb. And we want to change this history to bring it into a new perspective. And there's big halla bulla, you see. So I want to say to you that why we are honoring Subhash Chandra Bose, why we are remembering him. Because when the nation produces a leader who is fearless, the nation should never forget him. Because he is by example and inspiration for all of us. I think, many of the time Congress people, today I was very surprised to see statement by both Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi praising Subhash Chandra Bose. So I said never in their past they have ever praised Subhash Chandra Bose. Now what is new happened? Obviously, these files are making them nervous, I suppose. But the fact of the matter is, the criticism against Subhash Bose was done by the communists, it was done by the British, and today we owe the turning point of our history to Subhash Bose. I will explain to you how. I really respect our leader of the Congress Party, Mahatma Gandhi. He built a massive organization. He built a people's movement for freedom. His methodology, some may like, some may not like, but he did create, he built men out of mud. And subsequently, Congress Party built mud out of men. But he built all these great leaders, and therefore we were in a position to take over power when the British left. But the British left. Why? They won the war. 1945, they were victorious. Quit India movement was a failure. Not in terms of in change in mental attitudes of the Indians, but in terms of the physical thing. We were not able to make the British quit. So, what is it that changed? Why did Britain suddenly agree to leave India when they had become victorious in World War II? And that Clement Attlee, after he ceased to be the Prime Minister of Britain, came to give a lecture in Calcutta. And he was a guest of the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court. And the Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court has recorded, he has said that I asked Clement Attlee, why did you leave? You are so well placed and you had won the war. Here everybody was despondent, everything was finished, and yet you decided that you would leave. What was the compelling reason? Was it Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent movement? He said, no, that is not the main reason. So then he said, what is the main reason? He said, the main reason is that from day one, we in Britain had made up our mind that when the armed forces of India start to revolt and stop accepting our orders, that is the day we should pack up our bags and leave. This is vividly told in a story by a British author who went to witness the Battle of Plassey in 1757. And Robert Clive won that war, that battle. And then in Murshidabad, Bengal, he came in a victory celebration. He came walking to take over the throne. At that time, the people had collected a British author has recorded this, 5 lakh people had assembled to welcome him. And on his path, on the road, they were throwing rose petals. And he says, when I saw this scene, one thought came to my mind, that instead of throwing rose petals, if each of these 5 lakh people had picked up a stone and thrown it at Robert Clive, there would have been no Robert Clive at all. And he said, the day it enters the mind of the Indian to do that, to fight, that is the day Britain must get out of India. He has written this book in 1886. And Clement Attlee said this. He said, the moment Subhash Chandra Bose, men, INA came to India and they fired the imaginations of the armed forces. There was rebellion in Pune, there was rebellion in Jabalpur, there was rebellion all over, which we did not allow the newspapers to publish. But we knew that the mind had changed. And now no one was ready to listen to our orders, particularly the armed forces. And that is the day we decided that we will leave India. And we will not give the power to Subhash Bose, or people like him, but we will hand over to the Congress, which will allow us to return back to our country peacefully. In fact, we did much more than they expected. We even agreed to be dominion. For some time we had the British, the Mountbatten as our Governor General, and he was a very mischievous man. And then he made all kinds of concessions which he ought not to have. For example, he agreed orally that he will hold plebiscite in Kashmir. Under what right he had the power to say that? When India became independent, that was by a law, a bill passed in the House of Commons called the Indian Independence Act, which said that Britain ruled India partly directly, partly indirectly. Partly directly, areas which they themselves administered, and partly indirectly, like Mysore, where they had a regent here, but the king was the ruler of this place. And therefore they said, there are 600 such kingdoms in India. Now that we are leaving, we are declaring them all as independent countries. And the remaining, which is 2/3 of India, we are going to divide into India and Pakistan. Of course, the British Parliament said one will be a Hindu India and the other will be a Muslim Pakistan. But we chose that whoever wanted to stay in India, irrespective of religion, can stay. And therefore, we didn't follow, although Ambedkar was very keen that we should have exchange of population, but we didn't agree, and therefore this is India. But Sardar Patel, by his sheer effort, is another great man. By sheer effort, he persuaded these Rajas by Samadama Veda Danda. Sometimes he threatened them, sometimes he bribed them, sometimes he cajoled them, and out of 600, 500 kings signed the instrument of accession. And that instrument accession means that you become a part of India unconditionally and irrevocably. There was only one kingdom which Jawaharlal Nehru said, leave it for me. It is my home country, state, and that was Kashmir. And you know what a mess he left us with. That too was not going to be merged in India. The Pakistanis sent their forces, so the king came running here, and he met with Sardar Patel and said, please send the army to help me. He said, sign here, I will send. Otherwise, go back and be with the Pakistanis. And that king signed the instrument of accession. That day, Kashmir became an integral part of India, just like Mysore became an integral part of India, like Indore became, like Junagadh became, like Hyderabad became. All these states which merged in India was by that signature on the instrument of accession. And yet, he said, go to, we'll give you plebiscite. Who was he to say that? And Jawaharlal Nehru never listened to anybody. Once Sardar Patel, Mahatma Gandhi died in 48, Sardar Patel died in 1950. After that, Jawaharlal Nehru was all powerful. He never listened to anybody. Some people say, no, you're wrong, he listened to one person. I said, who? Edwina Mountbatten used to listen. I don't know whether it's true or not, but she certainly had a lot of influence, no doubt about that. And we made these things. The United States offered us the Chinese Security Council seat of veto, with the veto, because they had become communist, so they expelled them. There was a vacancy. And Jawaharlal Nehru said, no, this seat is of China. You know, he should have been in Sarvodaya or Bhudan movement, not Prime Minister of India. And therefore, China's seat was vacant till 1972, when the Americans finally decided to give it to China, People's Republic of China. So these are some of the fallacies we have to... So we will have to appreciate a person like Subhash Chandra Bose, who was very clear-sighted, and he didn't care for his personal sacrifice. And his remembrance will fire the imagination of our youth, And he's a man who sacrificed his ICS position, he sacrificed comfortable life, he fought for the country, and it is in this respect more files have to come. Only now beginning only 33 files have come. But more are going to come. A total of 100 files are there, but 33 from the Prime Minister's office. And I think the total history will be known, and we should learn from that history, and we should now start in thinking in terms of what this country should be made of. Subhash Bose was very clear that we are a continuing civilization. He used to say that 1,000 times. We are not a new country. We are an ancient country. This ancient country was top of the world in terms of economic progress as well as scientific advancement. And we have to make it the same way. UNESCO has listed 46 countries which were civilizations since time immemorial. And of these 46 countries, 45 have disappeared. Greece has disappeared. Greece civilization today is not the same as before. Same thing Roman, gone. Egypt gone. Mesopotamia gone. Babylon gone. Iran gone. The Zoroastrian Iran is gone. But they say one civilization is still a continuing civilization. That is the civilization of India. This greatness we have to bring now. Subhash Bose was a great supporter of Sanskrit language. People don't know that. And he had spoken many times about it. And so, what unites us should be very important. And I think Subhash Bose also showed by his army, he took everybody there. And he made no distinctions. And that has been our tradition. When we were 100% Hindu, the Parsis came to this country, we looked after them. And when the British were leaving, they told the Parsis that you are a small minority, these Hindus will eat you up. So we want to give you some reservation in Parliament. They said for 1,000 years the Hindus have looked after us, we don't need you, you go. The same thing the Jews who came after persecution everywhere in the world. They came to India and we welcomed them, built their synagogues in Cochin and Bombay. And when Israel was founded, the first resolution they passed after adopting their constitution was, thank you India, the only country where the Jews were not persecuted in the world. So we have that tradition. And we have to know that we are one people. The whole history is aimed at dividing us. Aryans and Dravidians, all this nonsense has been taught. Now we need to have books of history written by Indians for India and not by foreigners for us. And true history of India has to come out, and the spirit of nationalism that Subhash Bose symbolized must now become a part of all of our thinking. That will be the gain from the declassification of documents. Thank you very much. We are getting some requests for me speaking on Ram Temple. I don't know whether It is my aim that by the end of this year, legally, either by mutual negotiations or by the courts, we will be able to start the construction of the Ram Temple. And I say this for 4 main reasons. Number one, when the Supreme Court in 1994 gave a judgment of a constitutional bench on the Ram Janmabhoomi dispute, as it was called, they asked the government of India, that time Narasimha Rao's government, what is the solution to this problem? So the government of India was asked to file an affidavit. And they filed an affidavit. The Solicitor General filed the affidavit. And that affidavit said, if it can be shown that there was a pre-existing temple in that site, then we will hand over this land to the Hindus. That is what the government of India said. The Babri Masjid Action Committee was asked the same thing. And in the white paper produced by the government of India for Parliament on Ayodhya dispute, records that the Muslims who are stakeholders in this matter, they said, yes, if you can show that there was a pre-existing temple and on it was built a masjid, we will hand over this area to the Hindus. They have also said that. Supreme Court then asked the the Allahabad High Court, please find out by inquiry. So they set up an inquiry commission, which was headed by Bibi Lal, and his associate was a man called Muhammad, who has just recently written a book. I don't know whether you have seen it in the papers. And both of them began the exploration by using modern techniques like satellite imaging and so on, and then digging it up. And a report was given in 2005, that yes, indeed, there was a big temple before the masjid was built. So by Government of India's commitment to the Supreme Court, they should hand over this property to us. Second, the Allahabad High Court accepted the argument which I had been giving for many years, including in the House of Lords, in a matter of a smuggling case of Netaji statue, that a temple is a place where the God resides because we do prana pratishtha puja. So according to Agama Shastras, we build the temple and then we do prana pratishtha puja, and the God enters the idol and he becomes the owner of the temple. We can be trustees, but we can't be owners. So therefore, once a temple is built according to prana pratishtha puja, then it is always a temple, whether there is puja or there is no puja. So therefore, if there was a temple, then it is going to be a temple in the future also. Status of a masjid. I have been reading, after looking at Google, I told them, that you have been demolishing masjids left, right and center. That even at a masjid where Muhammad used to read namaz, you have demolished. Now what does that mean? Pakistan also demolishes masjids. Qatar also demolishes masjid. Turkey, to build roads, they are constantly demolishing masjids. So I asked the clerics of Saudi Arabia, tell me, how can you demolish a masjid? So they told me that masjid is a place for reading namaz, and therefore it can be built anywhere. You can do namaz on the street, you can do namaz on the railway platform, you can do namaz on the drawing room, and therefore when we build a masjid, it only is to facilitate reading of namaz, and it can be shifted in an orderly way. If the government decides, it can be shifted. And therefore we decide, sometimes we want to build a road, we tell them, shift the masjid, we tell the mutawali of the masjid, please shift it here. So I am offering to the friends I have in the Muslim community, you build a masjid, but across the Saryu river. This whole territory is Ram Janmabhoomi, not here. Now what is wrong with that? There are 40,000 temples which were destroyed and masjid built we Hindus don't want all of them back. I told Owaisi that leave 3, namely Krishna Mathura, Rama Ayodhya, and Kashi Vishwanath in Varanasi, and keep the rest 39,997. So he said, what kind of an agreement is this? I said, this is Krishna's agreement. So why? I said, when Mahabharat war was about to take place, Krishna went to Duryodhan, keep the Rajdhani, keep Hastinapur, keep Indraprastha, but give us 5 villages and we will leave. And Duryodhana said, no, not even the space on the tip of the needle I will give you. And that's how Mahabharata war started. So please learn from Mahabharata and accept my plea. But finally, many Muslim stakeholders have agreed to hold day-to-day hearing, support my plea for day-to-day hearing in the Supreme Court, and I am going soon to the Supreme Court to move a petition that there should be day-to-day hearing. I've written a letter to the Prime Minister also that the government Solicitor General should go also and say that we are in favor of day-to-day hearing. If day-to-day hearing is held, then because we won in Allahabad High Court, only law points are to be taken up. On that we are on very strong grounds. I am sure that we will win the case, and therefore by the end of the year, definitely Ram Mandir will be there. Thank you very much.